Well, addressing the economic crisis in the United States will be an urgent priority for Joe Biden's administration. Our business editor, Stephen Carroll, joins us now for more on this. Stephen, well, what sort of economy is Joe Biden inheriting, first of all?
Well, it's a very weakened one by the pandemic. Like almost every country in the world, the US economy took a massive hit last year. Lockdown measures meant businesses closing, people staying at home, lots of jobs being lost. And the recovery from that has been very uneven as well. That's a nightmare for any president. The figures are pretty stark. The latest forecast from the Federal Reserve show the US economy shrank by 2.4% last year. It's expecting it to grow by over 4% this year. The World Bank, in its latest forecast, not being quite as optimistic, seeing a deeper slump and a slower recovery from that crisis this year.
Growth figures only tell part of the story, though. What's the impact on workers?
Well, before the pandemic, the unemployment rate in the US was at a record low, 3.5%. It spiked enormously during the height of the pandemic last year. In April of 2020, unemployment was over 14% in the US, a huge spike you can see on this graph. It has come down since then. The jobless rate in December was 6.7%, but there are still almost 10 million fewer people at work in the US now compared to before the pandemic. There are worrying signs too in the latest job figures in the US. US employers cut 140,000 jobs in December. That's reversing a trend of growth in employment that we'd seen in the previous 5 months that was part of that narrative of a recovery from the first lockdown. We're seeing people out of work for longer as well. There are now 4 million Americans who've been unemployed for more than 6 months. That's considered long-term employment in the US. And the other aspect of this is that who has been affected by the job losses? Because the service industry has been the hardest hit, that's disproportionately affected women and disproportionately affected people from minorities. The unemployment rate is hugely different. If you look at the unemployment rate for Hispanic Americans, just one example, it's over 9% compared to 6.7% more broadly.
OK. What does Joe Biden plan to do about all of this?
Well, last week he unveiled what he called the American Rescue Plan. It's a plan worth $1.9 trillion, the equivalent of a tenth of the US economy. It includes more stimulus payments for Americans. So we had $600 approved by Congress at the end of last year. He wants to add $1,400 to that, so an overall $2,000 payout going out to Americans. Lots of those Americans who are out of work have faced their benefits running out. His plan would see the unemployment benefits extended for them to the end of September with a top-up payment of $400 a week. That's good news for many of the 18 million Americans who are claiming unemployment benefits in the United States. Also in the plan, money to help schools reopen. That's going to help working parents. And Joe Biden wants to move ahead with his plan of increasing the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. It's worth saying, of course, this is only a starting point. That plan has to go through the House and the Senate. And despite the fact that Democrats control both of those, there are going to be bargains and compromises that will have to be made. So this will be the start of a difficult set of negotiations right at the start of Joe Biden's presidency.
OK, so there is a deal to deal with the immediate crisis. But what's the bigger picture when it comes to the US economy?
One major element of Joe Biden's economic platform has been a $2 trillion, we're hearing a lot of trillions in his plans, $2 trillion investment plan in greener projects, focusing on reducing impact on the climate, but also boosting the economy. That's massive investment in infrastructure and public transport. The goal being every American city with a population of over 100,000 should have a good public transit system. There'll be funding to make buildings more energy efficient, as well as investment in clean energy and in research as well.
And what about paying for all of that, all those trillions?
Well, there is a plan to raise taxes, but only targeting the richest Americans and the most profitable companies. Specifically, Joe Biden wants to reverse some of the tax cuts that were made under Donald Trump's presidency. For those earning over $400,000 a year, they would see their top income tax rate go back up to just under 40%. He also wants to increase the tax on capital gains, again for people who earn over $1 million a year, to the same rate, and the top rate of corporate tax would go back up as well to 28%. Now, Biden's pick for Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen was talking about this in her Senate confirmation hearing on Tuesday. She also expressed support for Washington reforming the global tax system for taxing digital giants. We know this was a big bone of contention, particularly between France and the Trump administration. They have said, Janet Yellen saying that they think the talks ongoing at the OECD about a global deal on this are important to Washington. She says that will help America to get its fair share from these companies. So perhaps a point of cooperation there between the Europeans and the Americans on that issue as well.
Indeed. Interesting stuff. Thanks a lot.